It's our last show of the season for the Fantasy GOAT. This time we're giving out end of the season awards. Let's go. Let's do this thing. The Fantasy GOAT starts right now.
Who starts? Who sits? And how to become the greatest of all time. This is the Fantasy GOAT, sponsored by La Bonita Supermarkets.
Hello there and welcome. This is the Fantasy GOAT. I'm your host, Mike Davis. It's our last show of the year, so I want to thank all of you for being with us, spending so much time with us during the fantasy football season. You've made our time so much more special, and that also means today, because it's our last show, we're going to be giving out our annual Fantasy GOAT Awards. Today on the show, we have Sean Cruzen with Full-Time Fantasy and Sports Illustrated, and all the way from Chicago, Dr. Nithin Natwa at Fantasy Docs on social media, a must-follow all the time during the fantasy football season. And we also have my producer, James Edward Barrickman IV. He's going to be joining us from the control room today as well. So let's do this. I want to kick everything off, and Sean, you're going to do the honors. Let's talk about the biggest surprise of the fantasy football season this year. What has been your biggest surprise?
You know, if you're a regular who watches this show, you already know this answer for me, and it's Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can go back to all the reasons why. It had nothing to do with it. Was market inefficiency in the draft. Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, top receivers being drafted. In our pro leagues, Stafford wasn't going until the 16th, 20th round, if he was even drafted. So to get the number 2 quarterback overall, he's only behind Josh Allen, in one of those late rounds in the second half of the draft, that is a steal. That is the difference maker that gets your team to the championships. And one of the reasons why I have 4 of those teams in the top 10 of the world championships.
And it was just a lucky break that you were able to get so much stock of Stafford. Why did you end up with so much Stafford? Did you draft him, or did you just pick him up at the right time?
You know, a lot of people go into their draft, and we all don't have time to live and eat and breathe this like I do with Sports Illustrated, but I look at numbers, and I also look at where the skill players are being drafted. Mm-hmm. To me, Stafford was a no-brainer. You know, last night we were supposed to have wind and rain in Seattle. There was none. It was a shootout. So this year he had the back problems. It was scaring everybody away. I took advantage of that. So it was draft inefficiency. It was, you know, the players were letting him fall to me. So real easy to grab a Dak or a Mahomes in the middle rounds, and then just leave my second quarterback to Stafford, who I could get very, very late. That's where I was able to draft much higher skill players up in those 4th, 5th rounds, where most of the other quarterbacks like Lamar, Burrow, Allen were going.
Yeah,
so
it makes a lot of sense.
Made a huge difference.
Made a huge difference, and it's paying off for you. Dr. Natwa, we've spoken at length on this show about the fact that there was so much news out there, so much noise out there about Stafford and his back leading into the draft, that I think it scared off a lot of people. Who's your surprise? And I'm guessing it might be Stafford as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't be that surprised about Stafford just because I like him a lot. So I'm pretty biased. So I always expect him to do really well. And I've just seen him throughout his career constantly underestimated. People just thought he was a stat pattern and stuff like that, which is great for fantasy. But also he just always seems to be underestimated. Mm-hmm. So although I didn't expect him to do this well, I'm never super surprised when he just comes out of nowhere and puts up a stellar season. He had that rejuvenation chamber at the beginning of the season where we talked about how he's dealing with chronic pain, but that chamber that they bought that was like $180K, it's supposed to give relief at max for about 1 to 2 days, which is plenty of time for him to ball out every Sunday. So there were signs in place for that. For me, I think the biggest surprise was Olave. Olave, everyone's been expecting him to break out year after year, and this is possibly one of the lowest expectations for that New Orleans team, and he decided to go off this season. So he's carried you as a wide receiver 1, where people probably drafted him as a deep dart wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I love that pick. I haven't heard a lot of people with that take, but I think that's very genius. For me, I think I'm going to go negative with the surprise. I'm going to say Saquon. You know, I think Saquon Barkley, after the year he had last year, so many people thought, how could this not happen again in that Philadelphia offense? And he really, I mean, just never found the same footing with the injuries on that O-line. The Philadelphia offense never got settled in quite like they were last year. So to me, for where he was going and the lack of production, how we just didn't even see that many flashes, any games where he exploded for that 40-pointer. To me, that's just a massive surprise, and it's very disappointing, and it hurt me in so many leagues. Guys, coming up after a short break, we're going to be talking about fantasy football disappointment. I guess I could go with Saquon on that too, but we'll see what the panel has to say.
You're watching the Fantasy Goat, sponsored by La Bonita Supermarkets.
All right, welcome back to the Fantasy Goat. We're giving out the Fantasy Goat Awards this time around, our last show of the year. Dr. Natwa, this time we're going to be voting for our biggest disappointment of the year. Who gets your award for that?
It's got to be Brian Thomas Jr. And it's two-pronged as well, because he's been awful the entire season. And every week, everyone's like, maybe this will be the week he does well. And he doesn't do well until this last week, when you really don't want to take any high risk because you're already in the playoffs. And this guy who you drafted in the first round is giving you finally the numbers that you want, but it's the only time he's done it all season. So now, before you had an easy decision, you just didn't have to play him. But now he's stressing you out again, and he's making you question whether you got to put him in your lineup. So he's got to be the biggest disappointment for both the stress and the lack of performance.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the universal pick for a lot of people. I think even Saquon Barkley, as I was saying, he was my surprise of the year. I was going negative with that award, but I also think he could be in the running for disappointment. But yes, Brian Thomas Jr., especially, Doctor, because, you know, it's not like a Malik Neighbors where he got hurt, he's out for the year, or Tyreek Hill, he got hurt for the year. It's like there's not even really a lot of injury issues to talk. It just seems like he's changed completely. So it's a puzzling thing. I guess my last question to you, Doctor, on the Brian Thomas Jr. stuff, how much do you think that nagging, what was it, a wrist situation at the beginning of the year, how much of that can potentially be playing into or impacting his totality as a player this season?
We might get some news in the offseason that there was some sort of injury going on and maybe he gets an offseason surgery. And if he does, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to attribute this reduced performance to playing through an injury. We've seen it happen in multiple players. Tyreek Hill comes to mind most readily, where he played through a season with a scapulae wrist injury, and it was an awful season where his performance was significantly reduced. So it could be that. It could be, I think they had a play caller brought in who has been attached to a lot of kind of poor receiving performances. And it could just be that he had one good season, and we've seen it before, and we won't really know for another couple months, in my opinion.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Sean Cruzen, tell us, who's your biggest disappointment this year in fantasy football?
Yeah, the obvious choice, as the doctor mentioned, is Brian Thomas Jr., especially when you were drafting him in the first round. But for me, since I don't own very much Brian Thomas Jr., Lamar Jackson has been my biggest disappointment. He's ranked currently as QB 17 overall, which puts him in the QB 2 zone. He's been completely unreliable. He has not given us any of those Lamar used to be games where he's getting us the 40 plus, the week winners, and taking you, 40 plus points. So with Lamar being drafted generally in the 4th or 5th round of the pro drafts I'm in, he's underperformed quarterbacks like Jordan Love, Jackson Dart, who's a rookie, and who else? I don't know who it is, but he's underperformed. Bateman's another guy on that team that's underperformed. It's just been a disaster, and I don't think you can rely on Lamar. And that's one of the things we used to be able to. He was a set and forget quarterback. So when you draft a guy in the 4th round, that's kind of what you expect. And this year, a lot of Lamar owners have had to pivot. So for me, my biggest disappointment has been Lamar. And I'm leery to start him even this week going up against New England. I would start Joe Burrow against Miami before I'd start Lamar this week.
All right, Producer James, do you want to give a disappointing player?
Yeah, I think the correct answer is probably Brian Thomas Jr., maybe even a Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. I think it was Sean in earlier weeks. When are we going to start talking about this? Maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. just isn't that great of a receiver. I think he's in the conversation, and personally for me, and I think a lot of people watching the show are going to be like, you're an idiot for thinking this in the first place, but I was really high on Jerry Jeudy with Flacco being in Cleveland. I thought he was going to be a nice sleeper pick. Has not worked out.
Yeah, and I know Mark Deming, friend of the show, panelist all the time, he was big on Jeudy as well, so you and I followed suit with that. But listen, that's part of fantasy football. There's always going to be the surprises. There's always going to be the disappointments. Coming up after a short break, we got more Fantasy GOAT plus La Bonita. We're here at La Bonita in Green Valley, and listen, you know me, I love my breakfast, and La Bonita is known for their breakfast. I'm here hanging out with Armando. Armando, listen, you guys are known for your breakfast. You're known for your chorizo, which you make in-house. Break down the plates you got for us.
Yeah, so here at La Bonita, inside the taquerias, you'll find lots of different breakfast options, but these are some of our most popular, our most favorites. This is the huevos con chorizo. This is my personal favorite. The chorizo is made in-store. It's an old family recipe of ours. It's really good. You make it with eggs. You can throw that chorizo in the grill. You can throw it in a burrito. There's lots of different ways, but this is one of my go-tos.
Okay.
The next one right here, these are the huevos rancheros. It's fried egg, it's some ham, and a tortilla on bottom. You with rice and beans, it's really good as well. And this is probably one of the best sellers. This is the breakfast burrito. It's eggs, beans, potatoes, cheese. It's really, really good. Our breakfast is super affordable. You can find it on Uber Eats. Like this breakfast burrito, for example, is $4.99.
Wow.
I don't think you can find those type of deals around town too much anymore.
You can't beat it, and you know me, I love my breakfast burritos. Guys, I gotta dive in. 10 a.m. starts, you're watching football, Uber Eats, my mouth is watering. Armando, breakfast burritos, $4.99, La Bonita. They do breakfast, and they do it right. Wow. Yo, that's so good.
You're watching the Fantasy GOAT, sponsored by La Bonita Supermarkets.
All right, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Fantasy GOAT. It's our last show of the year, so we're giving out some fantasy football awards. Sean, who is your fantasy MVP this year?
Mike, and to the viewers out there, first off, I want to acknowledge the viewers. They're our MVP.
Yeah,
they're the ones, as well as La Bonita, our sponsor. Two solid MVPs. So shout out to everybody there. And fans of this show, as you know, my MVP, you're going to see the Jonathan Taylors, the Gibbs, JSN, Puka, but for me, it's Christian McCaffrey. I drafted him anywhere in the first round, even if I was at number 2, or if I could luckily get him at 8, 9, 10. So I've got Christian McCaffrey everywhere. One of the key stats, and I want the viewers to do this next year when they're going into their drafts, look at total opportunities. We're talking total rushing attempts plus passing attempts where you've had the ability to catch. He is leading the league in opportunities this year. So last year, for instance, Josh Jacobs finished second to Saquon Barkley. Mm-hmm. Since you're in my tournaments, I have Josh Jacobs everywhere because he had the second most opportunities. Right. He didn't do what Saquon did with his opportunities last year, but he had them. So we look for players that are those bell cow running backs. Christian McCaffrey, like I said, number 1 RB in fantasy. But if you also just looked at his receiving stats alone, he'd be a wide receiver 1 as well. So
it's insane.
It's insane. He's a dual threat that you just
and there's always an associated risk with taking him. So I think it makes it even sweeter for the teams and the managers who did take him because there is that inherent risk with taking him. And San Francisco's been injury prone all season long on both sides of the ball. But the one guy who's the most injury prone dude hasn't been injured all year, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Producer James, let's go to you. Who's your MVP this year?
I'm going to go back to what we were talking about last week, but I got to stick with Puka, man. He wasn't that, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, those were the guys you were taking as the top 2 receivers off the board. Puka was kind of going middle, later, first round. And to go back to what we were talking about in the A block, like the biggest surprise, how did we miss on Matt Stafford? How did we all just see where he was going and just let that happen in a LA offense led by Sean McVay with all those weapons, Devontae Adams, Puka, Kyron Williams? How did we just sit back and let that happen? I know there was back concerns, but looking back, man, it's just like I can't believe we all let that just happen.
Well, I think what happens, and Dr. Notwa said this, I think he is one of those players who's perpetually, undervalued to a degree, even as a former number 1 overall pick. But I do think a lot of it, James, is just because people don't want to buy in on that one more season where it could all fall off of a cliff. It's the Cooper Kupp.
The last one there.
Yeah, it's like the Cooper Kupp stuff. It's like, how many more times are you going to keep going to the well till, he really is 38. He shouldn't be performing at this level anymore. So I think that's what it is for a lot of people. And I think, speaking of McCaffrey, that's going to come at some point, right? When's the year where it's too much, So I think that's what happened. But it's weird with Puka, with Sean McVay, with Devontae Adams. You would have thought a lot more people would buy in just because of the weapons that he has, and those mouths need to get fed. Dr. Notwa, who's your MVP for the fantasy football season this year?
I agree. It's got to be CMC. He just exceeded. Well, no, he met his top flight expectations for being uninjured, and everyone just thought he wouldn't make it uninjured, and he did. And it was like that initial emotional downfall of when it popped up with an Achilles injury, I think a day before the first game of the season. And everyone was just like, oh, it's just over. Like, the season's over before it began. And then he just comes out, all cylinders firing, just puts up minimum 20-point games all season pretty much. And just, it's got to be great for those owners.
Yeah, he really did. He met those expectations, and, just for him to meet them, that's a big deal itself. Guys, coming up, we have one more block. We're going to be talking about who will be, or who should be, the number 1 pick in drafts next year.
You're watching the Fantasy Goat, sponsored by La Bonita Supermarkets.
Well, thank you for joining us all season long here on the Fantasy Go. We got one last order of business before we go. We gave out our awards, but now I'm curious, looking ahead, what does our panel think about? What does our panel want to do if they have the first overall pick next year? So, Dr. Notwa, let me start with you. If you had the number 1 overall pick next year, who would be the guy you would take with that pick?
For me, it's got to be JSN. He's just getting the receptions. He's getting the points. And I know Chase is up there as well. But, Chase gives you those blowout games. But there is also a slight risk of him not giving you a lot of points on a week, just because for some reason he didn't get those 3 receptions that went for 90 yards apiece. But JSN just gets the volume. And in that offense with a quarterback who is not even arguably close to the level of talent as Burrow, and still puts up those wide receiver 1 overall wide receiver 1 numbers. So I just think he's in a not ideal position right now, still putting up numbers. I think his position can only get better.
Wow. So you're saying Jackson Smith and Jigba over Jahmyr Gibbs, over Bijan Robinson. That's the guy you would be taking first overall if you had a draft today for next year.
Yes.
Okay.
And I will say I forgot about Gibbs, to be honest. So maybe put a tie with Gibbs.
Okay,
but yeah,
all right. Yeah, especially since you do. I thought you'd be a little bit of a homer since you do root for Detroit. But yes, I think Jackson Smith and Jigba, there's going to be a lot of fanfare around him, and I think a lot of people will look to draft him in the top 5, probably as the number 1 wide receiver as well. James, producer James, tell us who's your number 1 pick next year. It might be. I feel like you might even be a Puka guy, James.
It's so hard, looking at that right now because we have free agency, the draft, and whatever could happen. I think JSN's a great answer, actually, but I'm going to keep it generic here. I'm going to say Jamar Chase is probably your top pick next year. I wouldn't hate a Puka in that spot, but I'm going to say Jamar Chase. Cincinnati gets back. They're hungry. Burrow, Higgins, and the boys looking to rebound from what's been a disappointing season this year. And Jamar Chase is your number 1 overall pick next year.
I'm shocked. I really thought everybody was just going to be on the Bijan Jahmyr Gibbs train. Sean cruising. Tell me, are you going to stop the bleeding here? Who is your number 1 pick next year?
Yeah, this one is a lot different than James and the doctor. I'm not a big fan of drafting wide receivers. Justin Jefferson has showed us what happens when you draft a wide receiver.
They're quarterback dependent.
A lot of variables. Yeah, health plus the quarterback. So I generally will start with a bell cow running back who is high on that opportunity list. Right now at Sports Illustrated, we talk about this all the time, forward looking. It's Jahmyr Gibbs, it's Bijan Robinson. They're both, top running backs this year at their position, huge efficiency, bell cows where they play all 3 downs. This year, Gibbs has even set himself farther apart than Montgomery, so that's really not a split anymore. Those 2 are the consensus number 1, number 2 right now as we sit looking at next year. And if you draft against me like you and James do, you know I go against grain. If we're drafting today and it's next year, I'm still drafting CMC.
Wow. Well, listen. It's a crazy season. I don't think I'm going to be going with my heart anymore. I went with my heart this year. I went with Barkley, but I'm going to probably go Bijan Robinson next year. I just want to thank you all at home for sticking with us all season long. Good luck in the fantasy playoffs. Dr. Nawa at Fantasy Docs, Sean Cruz and James. I'm Mike Davis. Have a tremendous season and Happy New Year, everybody.